The naval history of the Normandy campaign cast a spell on me early in my career, and I have returned to the subject repeatedly in print, online, and on camera. I was once asked which historical event I would like to have seen, and I answered D-Day without hesitation, although I immediately caveated that D-Day was terrifying, stressful and dangerous, and I would certainly not wish to have taken part. But to have witnessed the scale of it would have been extraordinary. In 2008, while working aboard the Imperial War Museum's (IWM) historic cruiser HMS Belfast, I wrote a short article for the Mariner's Mirror, the journal of the Society for Nautical Research, about that ship's participation in Operation Neptune, the assault phase of Operation Overlord, the Allied liberation of Nazi-occupied Europe. I was convinced there was a bigger story, and I was delighted when, a few years later, the IWM invited me to write a book on the same subject entitled Firing on Fortress Europe. And yet this still wasn't enough. Every time I approached the story of the Allied navies in the Seine Bay, it got bigger. Belfast was just one ship with a very specific role on the Normandy gun lines supporting the army by bombarding shore targets. Thousands of other sailors made Neptune happen. They crewed landing ships, tiny assault landing craft, and wallowing motorized barges. They spotted for the big guns. They swept mines and protected the flanks of the invasion from attack. They sank block ships under fire and helped to build the famous Mulberry harbours. Later, they repaired devastated French ports. Ashore, they planned, organised and delivered the entire operation from drafty offices and underground bunkers, everywhere from Orkney to Falmouth. And yet the more I read, the more I realised that these sailors were largely absent from the literature, particularly from more recent publications, even though Neptune Overlord is widely recognised as the greatest, most complex amphibious operation in history, and amphibious operations depend on ships and sailors. At most, readers will find one or two, usually operating landing craft, and usually on the 6th of June 1944. Sailors appear as passive facilitators, an adjunct to the troops whose only role was to ferry them to the beaches. There are more books about paratroopers than there are about sailors, and this book is an attempt to redress that balance. This is not another book about D-Day, another book about Operation Neptune, or indeed about Operation Overlord. Sometimes this narrative will refer to these two intimately linked operations as Neptune Overlord. Neptune began at 23:30 on the 25th of May, when the signal went out for sealed orders to be opened. Half an hour later, the military holding camps on the south coast were sealed. It ended, according to the British Naval Staff history, on the 3rd of July, when the last of the senior officers who had led the assault were withdrawn and new headquarters were established ashore. The withdrawal of all these officers and the transfer of the two naval commands to the shore marked the stabilization of the naval position in the assault area. This was the official end of Operation Neptune. The demanding work of the Allied navies to protect, support and sustain the invading army did not end with what was a fairly perfunctory change in command structure.